Hey guys, it's Kevin in my review for the latest animated series on Amazon Video, that of course being the first season of Undone. And what Undone is essentially about is we center on the character of Alma, and she is someone who is in her late 20s, and she's just going through a very repetitive lifestyle. Things for her, she's just starting to really feel just kind of annoyed by how manufactured and just how same her life really does feel. She hasn't really done anything that exciting. She has a boyfriend that, while very supporting, she clearly doesn't love as much and things like that, and it's just not a really great life for her, and a lot of that is due to the death of her father, who she really hasn't felt the same ever since he's died, and basically one day she ends up in this very serious car crash, and after that, she starts to see visions of her dead father, who has this proposition for her where she's going to go back in time and try to save him, and basically now she has to make a choice whether she wants to do that and if she's able to do it, and that's really all I'm going to say. So, Undone overall, I was pretty hyped for this show. If you guys saw my anticipated fall shows video, you know this was pretty high up there. Not just because of the fact that the creator of BoJack Horseman was behind it, and you guys know how much I adore that show, but also just the sheer concept of it all, of this girl possibly saving her father, but also not really knowing what's going on. I mean, there's a lot of places you can go with that. I really like the cast behind it. I really love the sort of rotoscope type animation, so I was really hoping the show could be something great, and I have to say, Undone pretty much delivered in the way I wanted to. This is a highly creative and very, I think, overall very cathartic and just very interesting series that I really have not heard too many people talking about, unfortunately, but it's one that I really can't praise enough. We're just getting to right now, starting off with the cast. And I think right off the bat, that is definitely one of the biggest draws of the show. This entire cast is so talented. Pretty much everyone all across the board gives very strong performances here. But easily the big standout, once again, is Rosa Salazar, who, can I just say, is having a hell of a year between this and Alita. And I think this is probably her best work yet. I mean, the character of Alma is someone who, there's many different facets of her. But she's also someone who, as I said, is kind of annoyed with, like, the way her life has become. But you also see her really starting to embrace the fact that she has this ability to go back in time and change her life, and how much that really does entice her. And Salazar just does a really good job representing just how complex of a character this truly is. Alma's someone who will frequently block out things that happened. She's someone who doesn't want to really face her own reality in that way, and I think Salazar does a really great job portraying this character. I really love what she ended up doing here, and I hope we get to explore more of her, because I think she really did kill it in this show, and I think she really is turning out to be a very fine actress for sure, who I definitely hope to see in more things after this, because I thought she was absolutely phenomenal here. And then, as expected, Bob Odenkirk is also fantastic at this show as the character of Jacob, who pretty much throughout the entire show is a blank slate to us. We actually don't know a ton about him. We know how Alma sees him, but we don't actually know how he was until, like, towards the end of the show. And that could be a really hard role to pull off, but Odenkirk really just represents just the sheer joyfulness, but also, again, the complexity of Jacob. Jacob and Alma, they have this really genuine relationship in that way, but you also see that Jacob is very much haunted by his past and some of the decisions that he's made, and I thought he just did a really great job. I love the bonding between these two. I think they had a really great chemistry for sure, and it's definitely one of the best things about this show. I think those two are extremely well casted. The rest of the cast also, though, gives some really strong work. Angelique, I thought, was fantastic as Alma's sister, Becca, who I really have not heard gain too much credit, but I thought she was really great here for sure. Constance Marie, great to see her in something that's not Switched at Birth. It's really good to see her on other shows. She's really great as Alma's mother. Siddharth Dhananjay, as well as Alma's boyfriend, I thought was fantastic here. I really haven't seen him in too much before, but I thought he did a really good job playing the character of Sam, someone who is so supportive, but it's to the point where he's almost too supportive in that way, if it makes any sense. And I'll get more into that in the writing and things like that, but I thought he did a really nice job. Those two had a very interesting relation for sure. Really, everyone in this cast was really great. I can't really think of a weak link, and that's definitely one of the best things about the show for sure. But now let's get to the directing and the writing here, which I think is easily one of the best things about the show. Raphael Bob-Waksberg, I have to say, I am so impressed by the way he went about this show, because you're going to go into it thinking that, okay, this is the creator of BoJack, and you're going to go in with a certain expectation, and I'll just say right now, this is nothing like BoJack. It is far more surreal, and I mean, BoJack, yes, it gets surreal, but the way Waksberg described it, this entire first season, if you guys remember the episode of BoJack, Downer Ending, it's, you know, the penultimate episode of season 1, where BoJack's on, like, that drug trip, and it's also when we find out about, how he wanted to be, you know, with, you know, he wanted to be in Maine and things like that with that girl. You know, we get into that in season 1. This entire season is pretty much structured in that way. This is a very disorienting and much more surreal show than you're expecting, and I think Waksberg did a really great job with that. But it also is really funny. There's a lot of really funny moments in the show. The comedy is very consistent, and the drama as well. It's just very well balanced altogether. It never feels like one is undermining the other. And it's much more of a dramedy than even BoJack is. Because even though BoJack, yes, I would say it is a dramedy, it leans far more heavily on the comedy side of things than it does on the drama for a large majority of the time. This show pretty much consistently is both, and I think they do a really great job with that, but it's also far more psychological in that way as well, and I really like the way Waksberg went about directing this series. I think definitely that was a challenge that going into the show people are going to have, but I like the fact that he directed the show completely differently, because you should. It shows your strengths as a director, and I think that was something that I was very impressed by here. The writing, though, also is absolutely superb when it comes to the show, especially when it comes to our main character, Alma. I mean, pretty much from the first episode, I was drawn into her. This is someone who, like I said, she's just so tired of her repetitive lifestyle, but she doesn't want to do anything about it because it's just easier that way. But you can tell that she needs a change. I mean, anytime that someone tries to open up to her or get close to her, she shuts them out completely. She's very sardonic in that way. She's someone who has might possibly have a mental illness as well, and I think they do a really great job with latching us onto this character, someone who frequently does make a lot of mistakes and does do a lot of stupid things, so that way when she gets this opportunity to change her life, we are more than willing to see her take it, but we also see the risk that could really be cost of this, because she does have a good relationship with her sister, even though, yes, things are a bit complicated there. Her and her sister do have a decent relationship. Her sister's engaged to be married, so we know that that's on the line. And she also is trying to, you know, fix things with her mother and things like that. But at the same time, her family is kind of fractured as well. They really have never been the same since her father's death. And she feels like this is the key thing that she can change in that way. So it's a very interesting character to explore, because you really don't know what she's going to do. There were many points in the show where I'm like, maybe she's not going to help him, maybe she is, maybe she's not, and I think they do a really good job of that. But it also is important to note that Alma is pretty much an unreliable narrator due to the fact that she may or may not have severe schizophrenia, and this is something we captured throughout the entire show. She very much could have a mental illness, so you actually don't know if when she's interacting with her father is real or not, and I think the show does a really good job with kind of misleading you into that. It honestly did for me. There were points in the show where I was looking at it and I'm like, oh, there's no possible way that, like, this isn't her talking to her father. But then after thinking about it, I'm like, wait, maybe there was. Maybe that isn't what's actually going on. So it's a really riveting show in that way, where you don't really know what's happening a lot of the time. And that can get frustrating, but the show finds a way to make that really riveting. And I think they do a really good job with that, but also just fleshing out the relation between her and Jacob, even though Jacob obviously hasn't seen her since she was a little girl, because that's when he was killed. You really do see the bond that these two have, and you see why she really needs her father. Jacob has a lot of aspects that are very similar to Alma in that way, and these two do have that genuine connection, so you can see why she is so set on possibly saving him, but you also see why she's very tentative because of the relationships that she has, and she's not sure if she wants to completely just change everything. So it's a really interesting way that they go about time travel, and I really like the way that was done for sure. And I think just in general, the way the show approaches the rules of what it can and can't do is also very fascinating. The way they handle time travel, it's different from what you would expect it to be. It's not like other shows where she goes back in time and things are changed, like, immediately. No, it actually takes a while for things to really change around her, but you do start to notice some key differences, and I think that was very interesting for sure, and I really did like the way that was portrayed here. But also just the family drama of it all. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that went on between Alma's mother and, of course, Jacob, and I thought that relationship also was really well fleshed out. Even though Jacob isn't there the whole time, we do get to see through flashbacks just how complicated of a relationship that really was, and the show gets you to really understand both perspectives, and I think they did a really good job with that overall here. Um, and really, every single relationship that she has in the show, I really did find myself latching onto. Whether it was, like I said, the complicated relation between her and her sister, where even though, yes, these two do have a really good bond, you also see that Alma is very critical of Becca's boyfriend, Becca's fiance. She doesn't really know if Becca should be with her fiance and things like that, and Becca's done some things that Alma isn't too happy with. She also has a very complicated relationship with her boyfriend Sam, who, like I said, is kind of too supportive in that way, to the point where this kind of annoys Alma. She doesn't like the fact of how committed he is, because she doesn't really know if she is there yet. So, again, all of these relationships, they just flesh them out really well in that way, and that's something that I was overall very impressed by. It's also highly unpredictable. I don't want to get into too much spoiler-wise, but there's a plotline especially involving Alma's boyfriend Sam, and I was not expecting them to go where they did, and I thought it was a really interesting direction for sure. There's really never a single moment in this show that I found even somewhat predictable. I think the show always found a way to do things that you would expect it to do, but not in the way that you necessarily would expect it to happen, and I think they did a really good job with that for sure, and I love the fact that it's not one of those things where, oh, it subverted my expectations, therefore it's good. No, it worked for the story. It made sense why they went there, and I especially towards the end, I was very impressed with the way things wrapped up here. But also, like I said, just factoring in the time traveling of it all, it just makes it that much more compelling. So overall, just a really riveting show altogether. The animation, though, is on another level here. I mean, this is top-notch animation for sure. And what I especially love about this style is just that the only reason the show really is animated is because of the certain things that they can do in that medium. But aside from that, you actually wouldn't be able to tell, because the way that all the characters are animated, like Rosa Salazar looks like Rosa Salazar, Bob Odenkirk animated looks like Bob Odenkirk. It's really cool the way they went about it. Pretty much everything feels so real in that way, and I really don't know how they pulled it off as well as they did, but I think the animation is absolutely top-notch here. There are so many just beautiful looking scenes. It's some of the best animation I've seen in anything this year for sure. It definitely should be praised. And again, considering how stylistically it looks from something like BoJack, I think it's that much more impressive that Waksberg took on something this different and took on something this stylistically challenging in that way. I think that's very impressive, and I think I think whoever did the animation here really pulled it off here for sure. I think it's absolutely beautiful, and I really did love it. The score is also fantastic throughout this entire show. It is very riveting, it's very emotional, and I really loved where they ended up going with it. I think they did some really great stuff there for sure. And then the editing for the show, I think the show is extremely well paced for sure, especially scenes that are involving flashbacks. I think those scenes were very well edited. There's some montages especially that I think are very emotional, and just in general, I think the show was very well paced. So in terms of flaws, though, I don't really have a ton to say. Like, I don't really have a lot of things that bother me. I will say, though, because of the fact that they do introduce time travel, there are points where you are a little bit confused as to what actually happened in this show. And I wouldn't say that's like a huge complaint or anything, but there is one scene that goes down that I'm just not sure if I like the way it happened. It's in the penultimate episode, and I get what they're going for, I really do, but I'm not entirely sure what they were, you know, if this actually worked, if it really made sense to go in the direction that they did. I get why they made the choice, and I can understand why someone could, you know, rationalize why it's there, but I just don't know if it makes a lot of sense. And I'll get more into it in the spoilers, but it just didn't really work for me as well as it could have. And because the fact the show is so flashback heavy, some of the present day storylines, they do feel a bit rushed, and they do feel like they could have been dived into a bit more, particularly Alma's relationship with her mother. They do a better job with it in the second half, but for a while, it feels like they could have done a little bit more there. It feels like they could have had a little bit more going on with that relationship, as well as her relationship with the teacher that she works with the boss at the daycare. There's not really a lot with that character. It's just he's kind of annoyed by her, and, you know, he's supportive and things like that. There's not really a lot to him overall. I don't really have a lot of complaints, like I said, with the show. It's really just those two things that sort of bring it down. But now with all that out of the way, let's just get into spoilers here, because there is actually quite a lot to talk about in terms of, like, what goes down in this show. So I'm just going to get into it. So a lot of people are wondering, and that this was something that I, you know, was kind of wondering as well, you know, the whole scene at the end, what does it really mean? Is Jacob actually there, or is he not? I at first thought it was pretty obvious that he was there, but you also have to factor in the fact that everyone else in this show pretty much thinks that Alma has a very serious mental condition. She has schizophrenia, and that she needs to go to a doctor about it, and that she is rejecting that help. And you wonder, do they actually have a point? Is this all just in her mind? Is she doing this as a way to escape her own complicated reality? Because if you really do think about it, it seems a little too simple. The idea that she's going to save Jacob and everything's just going to be fixed, you know, she's going to have a better relationship, her family isn't going to be as complicated, it all just feels a little too simplistic, to the point where it doesn't seem like that's actually what's going to happen. So when you really start to think about it, yeah, a lot of this could very much just be in her head. Maybe Jacob isn't really there. Maybe this is just her way of coping with her father's death in that way, and trying to act like there is a way to fix this when she just needs to accept her own reality. And it makes that scene with her sister at the end especially far darker if you look at it in that aspect. It's less of her and her sister bonding and her instilling hope in her this is actually going to go well, and her sister accepting that Alma isn't going to get better, and that she needs, the only way that she's going to have a good relationship with her is if she pretends like what Alma is saying is true, and that this can actually happen. So again, there's two ways of looking at it, and it really does, you know, from that mindset, recontextualize a lot of scenes in the show. And it does actually make a lot of sense. I mean, we know the reason why things did not work out between Jacob and Alma's mother is because of the fact that Jacob himself could have also had very serious schizophrenia. He was doing all these experiments on Alma when she was younger and things like that. So you wonder, was he prepping her? You know, was there actually a possibility that he can do this? Or is he just as insane? Did he actually have a very severe mental disorder as well? And is this the thing that really did hurt both of them? And is this just their way of connecting and you know, escaping their own reality? Jacob denying the fact that he's dead, but also him trying to reach out back to Alma. And you wonder again, is he actually there? And then Alma, it's her again trying to pretend like she's not in her own reality and trying to escape what's actually real. And I think a lot of that ties back into Sam as well. The fact that Sam, you know, blatantly lied to her that she broke up with him and they tried to make things work and she eventually just ended it, I think is a very good indicator that, yeah, this could very well be the case, that a lot of what we're seeing is not actually real. For all we know, there could be other things that Alma blacked out as well that we just don't know about yet. And I think that's a very interesting idea. I love the idea of Sam feeling like this perfect boyfriend, but him wanting to hold on to that relationship for so long that he literally negates the fact to her that she broke up with him before the crash, and that she you know, one of the last thing that he heard was her saying that she wanted to break up. And it makes sense because, again, we realize that she doesn't feel the same way about him. She doesn't want to stay committed. She doesn't want this serious relationship. She doesn't feel like she is with Sam in that way. Sam feels that way about her, but she doesn't feel that way about Sam. So it's a very complicated relationship, and I think they handled that very well too. But again, that really got me thinking, like, how much of this is actually real? And so that leads me to, like I said, the one flaw that I had. I'll get into it right now. It's probably what you think it is. In the penultimate episode, there is that scene with Becca where Alma just goes off. She tells Becca's fiance that she cheated on him with a bartender and things like that, and that Becca doesn't really want this, and you almost think, okay, she's just ruined everything. You know, this is going to ruin everything, and especially because it was the penultimate episode, I thought, holy shit, this is going to be her moment. This is going to be the moment where she completely ruins things with her sister, and then because of the fact that she supposedly time traveled, she retroactively fixes it. She alters the timeline completely to the point where, you know, Becca knows what she did, but she's going to withhold this from her fiance. So you almost wonder, like, which actually happened, which version actually, you know, came true. And that just got me really confused. That is the one plot hole that I just don't understand. And I looked into it, and I've heard people rationalize it as, oh, that was in her mind. That was maybe what she wanted to say, but she didn't because she knew what could happen. And I just feel it's a bit of a stretch. I just don't really understand the way that scene was handled. Again, maybe I'm just stupid. That's very possible, but I just don't understand the way things played out there, and I think they could have done a better job with that. But that being said, I love the way the show went about Jacob's character, because like I said, throughout a bunch of the show, you really do think he's like this great person, and that someone murdered him, only to realize that the reason he's telling Alma this is because he does not want to admit that he actually killed himself, that he killed himself because he felt he had nothing left. He felt that he had burned every bridge possible. He had a terrible relationship with his wife, who wanted to leave him, who knew the fact that he was possibly cheating on her, which we really, you know, we don't know if he was having an affair. It's still kind of unclear what was going on there. I think he was having an affair. I'm leaning towards that, but the show doesn't give you an outright explanation, which again makes sense considering how unreliable of a narrator that Alma really is. But, you know, he also didn't have a great relation with Alma, with him just leaving her and things like that. So he felt he had nothing left to lose. And that moment where he's telling Alma, like, you can't save me, I'm a lost cause, that really got me thinking, like, is this Alma in her mind realizing that this isn't actually happening, that she can't actually save him, and that she's just convincing herself that this can happen? It's a really interesting idea, and again, I know it really is a lot to think about, but that's one of the things I really love about the show, is that it provoked all of these interesting questions that I do think are eventually going to get answered. I do think in later seasons, if the show goes on, I do think they're eventually going to answer them. I just think that there's a lot more that we do not know yet about this show. There's a lot more that they need to get into more, and I'm excited to see how that turns out. And the first question is Jacob actually going to walk out of that cave? Did he walk out of that cave, or did something else happen? You know, did something else come out of that cave that we don't know about? Did Alma actually change the reality? I mean, that's the first thing that we really need to know. And once we've gotten into that, then I think we can get a clearer idea of if this is in her head or not. It's a very interesting narrative. I love the way they're going about it, and I just really hope they continue to explore this in Season 2. I really do need a Season 2 of the show, mainly just because of how the way things left off here. I think there's a really interesting and compelling narrative you can get out of this for sure, and I hope they do choose to do that for sure. So overall, guys, Undone is a highly creative and inventive show. It's a show that definitely, I think, is going to frustrate some people because of how unreliable a narrator that Alma really is, but also is that much more riveting. It has great performances from the entire cast, but Rosa, Salazar, and Bob Odenkirk especially really do stick out here. The animation is on another level. It's top tier for sure. The score is great. The story itself is very engrossing, and just in general, this is everything that I really really did want it to be. It really to show how Raphael Bob-Waksberg is one of the best creators working today. It's definitely, BoJack is not just a fluke, and I really hope that this show does not suffer the same fate that the previous show that was a BoJack animator creations ended up. I really do hope the show gains an audience. I really do want to see the show continue. I think there's so many more ideas you can flesh out here. I think there's so much you can do in this world, and I really just hope they take all the opportunities that they possibly can, because what's presented here is really compelling. I really do want to see where they end up going with it, just to, not just to answer those questions, but just to see what else the show has in store, what else we can get out of the show, because it is so expansive in that way. It's so different. There's so many places they can go with it, and I really do hope that does end up happening here. So overall, guys, I really did adore Undone overall, and I am going to give Undone Season 1 overall in A-. So overall, guys, in my review of the first season of Undone, let me know what you guys saw this season overall, left your thoughts on it. We'll see you guys in my next video, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.